Hmm.
If you're looking between investing in Anchorage versus the Matsu Valley, obviously there are going to be pros and cons for both
Hmm.
markets. So, from your perspective, what are some of those pros and cons either way?
Anchorage is more stable. However, I feel like the growth potential, it's kind of like a blue chip stock versus an emerging market, right? I think there's more potential for profit on the um, Matsu side. I felt like a lot of the fourplexes out there for the last few years have been wildly overpriced. That may still be the case, but the rents in the valley are just so unbelievably, are just climbing at an unbelievable rate right now that um, if I could build a sixplex right now, it would be in the valley, because of the lower taxes. However, there's a lot to be said for buying in that, in that big, it's a bedroom community at the end of the day. There's not a lot of jobs in the valley either. And what you'll see is the migration patterns will flow with the price of gas. As gas prices go up, a lot of those commuters start to go, I could save a lot of money by living in Anchorage.
That's a good point. I hadn't even thought about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we see it kind of ebbs and flows, but Anchorage tends to be stable right now. But rents in the valley used to hover around $1 per square foot. They are well above that now. They're into that $1.17 range now, depending on the type. So I think there's a lot of potential in the valley, but it's just with a slightly higher risk that you don't have the job stability, and you'll see migration depend on, as gas prices go up, and they certainly are right now, you'll see people consider Anchorage again just to save that money on gas.
That's a good point. All right, so this is just our last questions here. What are some risks associated with really just using self management for like every property that you have in every situation? What are some risks associated with that for people that are considering doing that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The first thing when somebody says, I want to manage myself. Now keep in mind, I just got done saying, I'd like you to manage your own fourplex. When you buy it, when you buy that first investment property, I'd like you to manage it yourself for the first while. I still stick by that. However, this can turn into a part-time job real fast. And you got to remember that when you go to Hawaii, you're still on the clock. You still have to address problems. A lot of people they think all we do is, we're an accounting firm that calls plumbers. All we do is collect rents. All we do is, call a plumber when things go wrong. This is a lot more complex than that. I mean, we stay on top of federal law changes. We stay on top of case law. We stay on top of what's going on in the more kind of blue progressive states where laws tend to be a lot more tenant friendly, because that will tend to then follow in the other states later. Our job is if we're really doing our job, you're going to think we're not doing anything. Just like you, right? I have friends all the time. They're like, I don't need an agent. All they did was drive me around, show me properties. What they didn't know is all the problems you solved that they never knew they had. And we're the exact same way. All the problems that they never knew they had, or they never had, period, because I prevented it before it ever happened. Because I pour over every period in my lease to make sure that, nothing happens, that landlord agreements are set up with the utility companies, that that I know the difference. I know how to qualify somebody for an early move out based on the SCRA. It's the depth at which we can get you out of the complicated problems and all the problems that we prevent before you ever had them. So yes, I would still encourage you to go manage yourself. for that first investment, then once you've kind of gotten taste for how difficult this is, then call a property manager, because you're not going to be able to scale as an investor if you don't. You just can't. So
Yeah, and I think that's really huge, because a lot of do-it-yourselfers get themselves into a lot of trouble when it comes to these when it comes to trying to do real estate investing and not wanting to work with somebody that actually knows what they're doing. Because
yeah.
I mean, I know what you're definitely saying. You need to kind of manage that first property on your own to kind of get a good understanding for it, and to at least have a baseline understanding of what goes into the process. But if you're wanting
hmm
to scale and do anything that's actually going to be life altering, you just can't do that on your own.
Yeah,
Like,
I'm not my own attorney. We use our own attorneys too. Like, I think that's the mark of a professional, is knowing what you don't know, right? Knowing when to defer to someone